Shalom, privyet, salut tout le monde, and welcome. So today's video is going to be about the spiritual nomad, and that is really this rise of neo-paganism, atheism, and really the spiritual destruction of the West, and the tactics used by our enemies to destabilize us spiritually, to destroy our culture from within. So you have this rise of neo-paganism and atheism, and it's really, in my opinion, Bolshevism 2.0. They weren't strong enough to destroy us toe to toe. Us in the West, America, Canada, Europe. The tactic changed. They couldn't defeat us man to man, so the tactics kind of changed. So we're going to talk about that. So this is going to be kind of a long video, okay? And I apologize for that. But we're going to talk about the spiritual nomad who their tactic really is not to defend what they believe in. We don't really know what they believe in, but they are now pushing everyone towards and into a direction of neo-paganism, abandon Christianity, abandon God, cut your spiritual foundation that really built the West. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. And it is hard for me to admit that this is a battle I can't win. My opponents are they're well funded, they're well organized. I don't have the resources and to really fight this. And I guess there's no shame in defeat as long as the soul lives on to fight another day. And you can lose the battle, and that's okay. The war will go on. So we're going to talk about at the end a little bit more about victory and defeat, and that we're going to look, whether it's the prophet Jeremiah, who in a sense lost his war, Christ, where he appeared to be defeated and lost his that he lost the battle, you could say, but he won the war. What appeared to be a defeat wasn't a defeat at all. And I would also say that about what happened with Germany, what happened in Russia. And so we're going to talk about that, I guess, a little bit later. But the spiritual nomad has no home. They can sit there and throw rocks at you. You're trying to build something. You have a home. You have something. You don't. So, for me, I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm looking at a building that's breaking down, and I'm trying to rebuild it. And as I'm trying to rebuild this house, you have a bunch of guys throwing rocks, and you don't know where they live. You can't throw rocks back. You're always on the defense, and they're always on the offense, because they're here to destroy and to tear down. They're not here to build. And it is far easier to destroy something, to burn a house down, than to rebuild one or build one. So that's the tactic of the spiritual nomad. They are just in a far better position because their tactics are just brutal and focused on destruction. And also, when you're a Christian, you're going to play by the rules, right? You're not going to resort to lying and stealing and cheating and killing and vandalism and burning things down. You're gonna fight war fair with rules. So we are always at a disadvantage as Christians. And when the internet is so controlled, they can push whatever they want. And when all of academia is behind them, most scholars in the West are not paid to defend Christianity. They are paid to destroy it. They're funded by the universities. They're the ones selling all the books. And these spiritual nomads are backed by all of academia, the majority of academia. And the Christian speakers that are prominent on the internet are not the Christians that make sense. They're the Christians that, again, like I spend most of my time battling Christians, okay? Because I'm trying to repair the house that has been destroyed. And so, anyways, so we're going to talk about this, I guess, a little bit later. And the thing that's with the spiritual nomad, like my opponents, their views will change. Again, they're just throwing rocks. And every week, every month, their views will change because they don't have views, right? So if we were looking at this like as a courtroom and my opponents are prosecuting us, they're the prosecutors and we, the Christians, are on the defense. The spiritual nomad brings the first guy in, and his first witness. And his first witness says, Jesus was just a man. He wasn't the Son of God. There was no resurrection. He was just a man, and his story got embellished over time. And the spiritual nomad says, amazing. That's a great, thank you. You can step down from the stand. Thank you for your testimony. Witness, 2, you can come up now. Well, Jesus was a Roman spy. He was sent to Judea to pacify the Jews. And so that's who Jesus actually really was. He was a Roman agent sent to pacify them. Amazing. You can step down now. Third witness comes up. Jesus was actually a Jewish agent. He wasn't a Roman spy, and he was sent by the Jews to subdue the Europeans and to bring the world into worshiping a Jew. And then, okay, that's amazing. You can step down now. Fourth witness. Well, actually, he never existed. It's all a fiction. There is no man. He's a myth. And so forth. And it goes on, and they just keep bringing up the next witness. And in any normal court, the prosecution would lose. You have all these different witnesses, all with different views. None of them match. So what's your case here? You're just throwing anything you could think of to attack the defense. You yourself, Mr. Prosecutor, you don't have a view. You have nothing to stand on. It's just one witness after another. But in our situation, the courts seem to be playing by the prosecutor's rules. And so we are at a disadvantage, okay? And as fast as we build the defense for one witness, they've thrown another rock, they've brought in another witness, and the story just keeps changing. And they don't fight each other, okay? And their beliefs will change depending on who they're talking to, all right? So let's just look at an example. And I'm going to use the same guy just because I already have all the clips. But there's numerous guys on the internet right now. There's countless, really, that are now pushing the same narrative, backed by academia. They just keep having professor after professor, scholar after scholar, PhD after PhD come on with a new view. But they never have these PhDs come on to fight each other. They're united in the destruction of Christianity. Okay? They will, no different than the Bolsheviks, once Christianity was destroyed in Russia, what happened to the revolutionaries? It wasn't until Christianity was destroyed that they then all turned on each other, and only then did they destroy themselves, until one faction, Stalin in this case, was supreme. And Lenin had to die, Trotsky had to die, and whatever, the Mensheviks, the Bolsheviks, and they all went at it. So for now, while Christianity is here, these people are united. But when we lose the battle, and I've admitted, like, I've come to terms with, me personally, I can't fight this war, this battle, and win. But I am sure that I know we will win the war. And you kind of have to look at it like a forest fire. On the surface, it looks like a bad thing. The forest is burning, everything's terrible. But in the end, a lot of trees, a lot of saplings, seedlings, they need that fire to be born. The forest needs to be burned down so a better, stronger forest can emerge from it, a healthy, younger forest. And it's just the cycle of how forestry and forests work. And so we're kind of at a forest fire stage, but in the end, the forest will come back stronger than ever. And so I'm going to just play a quick video showing you one of my opponents. And I've already played this before, and I'm going to go over a lot of them again. But I just want you to notice how his beliefs change depending on who he's talking to. Okay, so when he's talking to the pagan, he's in full agreement that the Bible's fiction, it doesn't exist, it's not real. But then when he speaks to his Jewish rabbi friend, it is real. Okay, so we're going to play this, and just know that all these people should be fighting each other, but they're not, because they're united in the destruction of our spirit, of what built our home, what built our countries, our nations, and made us so strong and powerful that no one could fight us toe to toe. Okay.
I want to make this real quick before you, and I will show you this. My main point for bringing you on and having this conversation is I want people to know I'm not saying this is like some made up fairy tale. I think I even go farther than most critical scholars. I think it all existed. Every single character. I'll say I think there probably was a historical Moses. I'll even say parts of Deuteronomy were probably written by Moses. Most people won't say that. So I want people to know I'm not the anti-Judaism person that you think.
When about Abraham, they didn't refer to him as a Judean because Judah didn't exist.
Because Judah was not a real son yet, or he never was. But in the story, I'm saying, until you get to Judah, then the kingdom. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's let him play.
Even rabbis argue about who the first Jew was. Who could they consider the first Jew? A lot of them do say it's Abraham because it's the Abrahamic covenant,
right?
And
it might as well because it's all made up anyway. So
right.
Might as well just call it Abraham. Who cares? It's nonsense. I'm not saying this is like some made up fairy tale.
And
it might as well because it's all made up anyway. So
right.
All right. So you can see that when he's talking to his rabbi friend, and again, he studies under this rabbi. This rabbi praises him, loves him, calls him one of the most gifted young men he's ever met. And then when he's with his friend Adam Green, it's all bullshit. It's all nonsense. It's all a fairy tale. It's all made up. And so this is what we're dealing with. With one audience, they'll say one thing, and then with another audience, they're going to say another, because their job is just to set fires. Okay? And this rabbi has called for the destruction of the Western world. He's called for the destruction of America. And as Americans, we need to recognize that, no one could stand against us. We were blessed above all nations. And our enemies recognized this, and they had to change their tactics, okay? They had to change their tactics. And this guy in particular, what's funny about him is this Gnostic informant guy. And I mean, it's in his name, Gnostic informant. These guys are Gnostics, okay? Our enemies are Freemasons, Gnostics, and you could say Kabbalistic Jews. And the Kabbalistic Jew is really a Gnostic, okay? The Chabad Lubavitch movement, the most powerful Orthodox Judaism sect, is a Gnostic sect. What makes them different from the other Jewish sects is they are founded on the Kabbalah and sharing the Kabbalah with the world, which is very similar to Freemasonry. It's Gnosticism. And in Gnosticism is like a perversion of Neoplatonism, which we'll talk about maybe a little bit later, but I could just, Neoplatonism is really, the philosophers realized that paganism was so disgusting and degenerate that their gods were so evil. They were pedophiles, rapists, drunks, adulterers. The philosophers eventually realized, from Socrates then to Plato, that we can't teach our gods like this anymore. And so the Neoplatonists they reformatted the Greek philosophy, the Greek myths, into allegories. They're not going to take them literally like the majority of people do, because the gods are very clearly based on human men, tyrants and kings who behaved like total degenerates, right? Plato said that the gods have no place really in the Republic, in the sense that you can't teach our gods the way they are to children. And so Plato developed this, God is all good, and then there's got to be a source of all evil kind of thing. And then it gave birth to Neoplatonism, this idea of dualism. And then you're going to have the Gnostics come in later and say that the God of the Bible, the God of the Torah, the God of Israel is the source of all evil of the material world, and we have to fight him and destroy him. And so Freemasonry and the Kabbalah are all based on fighting against the God of the Bible. So Freemasons have always been our enemies. The Kabbalistic Jews have always been our enemies. We just never recognize that. And these guys are very much fighting the Gnostic war. Okay, they want you to hate the God of the Bible. Okay, and I tried to debate this guy, and it's funny because he complained about Jay Dyer blocking him and not wanting to debate him and stuff. But I mean, if like he blocked me on my when I was engaging with him trying to point out his hypocrisy, he then turned around and blocked me. But I want to say something about these guys, and something that I appreciate about them is when they throw a stone, what it's doing is it's forcing us as Christians to reevaluate our scriptures, to reevaluate the Bible, and to look at the Bible a little bit different. And they got me on one thing. Like, there was something I didn't have an answer because I never really looked into it. And they were talking about how Luke was a Gentile. He wrote the book of Luke and the Gospel of Luke, and he wrote the book of Acts. And Luke was a physician, he was a historian, he was a companion of Paul. And Luke never knew Jesus. He comes in later, and he admits that. And then what Luke did later is he went and he wrote an account. He obviously went back and interviewed Mary. So when you read the Gospel of Luke, it's clearly from the perspective of Mary. And what Luke probably did is he went and visited Mary and actually got her account. Okay? And in the book of Luke, for instance, it mentions, I'm not going to get into this too much now. I'm just going to give you an example of why I appreciate my opponents and how they've really helped sharpen me and strengthen my faith. And they're going to attack you with this census, that the whole Gospel of Luke is a lie because of this Roman who was mentioned. So Caesar Augustus said that the world should be taxed, the oikumeni, the Roman world should be taxed. And then it was during the taxation, the census of Quirinius, this Roman here. And then they'll point at history and Josephus and say, well, Quirinius wasn't governor until 6 AD, right? So like 10 years after the birth of Christ. So therefore the Gospel of Luke is all nonsense. And then they'll point at in Acts when Gamaliel, famous Pharisee, gave an account and talked about two revolts. Judas of Galilee, right? The Judas of Galilee revolt happened in 6 AD under Quirinius. And then they're going to point at this one with Theudius, okay? And say that it's wrong, it's not correct. And then they're going to point at a revolution that happened in 40 AD, way after Gamaliel said this, 15 years after Gamaliel said this, 10 years or so. And say, see, Luke is a lie. Luke copied from Josephus. He copied it wrong. He got the wrong revolt. And I'm going to tell you guys something. I didn't have an answer for it. But then what it forced me to do was, and I hit a point where I'm like, I think Luke got it wrong. And then what I did is I said, you know what? I need to study Roman census law. How did Rome conduct censuses? What's the law there? What archaeology do we have to back this story? Who is Quirinius? I need to know his entire life story and everything we know about him. And guys, I'm going to tell you something. That when I investigated and saw, and again, they're bringing on this guy, Dr. Mason, the number one Josephus scholar, and they're bringing all these guys from academia to tell you how wrong Luke is. And my mind was blown when I went into this and I saw how accurate Luke was, how frightening, and how no one looked at the small little words that are actually being used in this story and what Luke actually said. And when you understand that he's probably interviewing Mary, it becomes even more powerful, okay? That Mary is telling you what happened, and for me, it's rather amazing. And I can't get into this now, but I'm going to tell you that I love what I learned here. It has strengthened my faith tenfold, after feeling defeated, that I didn't have an answer for this. And then thanks to them forcing me to study Roman law, study Quirinius, study the revolts that happened. And it really paints a whole different picture of what Joseph and Mary went through leading up to the birth of Christ and how chaotic this period was, But we'll talk about this another time. Okay, so our opponents right now, and I apologize, this is probably going to be a long video, but I'm going to get it out there, and I hope you guys learn something from this, or I really do. It's really heartbreaking to see the destruction of our homes and the destruction of our faith, and feeling helpless because our enemies just have so much power. And if you were to tell me this, I really feel like the prophet Jeremiah, who grew up at a time when the country was better than ever. Judah was at its peak. It had its greatest ruler, Josiah. Josiah had completely reformed the country, restored it. They were rich, powerful. And then Jeremiah watched his country go from amazing, its peak, to absolute destruction in one generation. And as a kid who grew up, I was born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s. I watched this, I witnessed this, And I know a lot of young people watching me. It breaks my heart that you can't understand. You didn't see what I saw. And I didn't appreciate what I had when I was growing up in the 90s. And I didn't have a good life in comparison to the average kid around me. I had a very, very difficult life, very poor life. And even though I grew up poor and in a bad situation, my life was still really, really good in comparison to the rest of the world and the rest of history. And I really have nothing to complain about, okay? But our opponents couldn't destroy us toe to toe. And when you talk about warfare is really fought in a way. You have to look at it fighting war like a man and fighting war like a woman. And in the Bible, we have examples of this. When the Israelites were in the wilderness, the Israelites were unstoppable. No one could go toe to toe with the Israelite men. And so one of the prophets sent to mess with Israel, Balaam, sent women into the Israelite camp because they knew they couldn't beat the Israelite men toe to toe with their men. So they used the women to bring down the men. And that's going to be fighting war like a woman, because women are at a disadvantage when they fight a man. A woman can't fight a war toe to toe. The man will just overpower her and subdue her. So the woman has to be clever and crafty and use her charm, use her seduction, her deception. And she has to infiltrate. She works like a spy. And that's how we were taken down. We were not taken down. No country could stand against us. And so our opponents did exactly this. They come in and they destroyed us spiritually. They destroyed us from within. Okay? They couldn't destroy us economically. They couldn't destroy us through military might. They had to, it's like the story of Samson and Delilah. They had to send in a Delilah to take down the strong man. And by cutting his hair, they severed his connection to God, where our true strength really lied. And that is what our opponents have done, and it is what they are doing. And I don't think it is a battle we're going to win. I think we will win the war in the end, but once Christ is removed and they succeed in removing, and God removes himself, these people are marked for destruction. They have no solution once they burn down the house. Once the house is burnt down, they're going to have nothing. And then at that point, when they don't have Christianity to unite under and destroy, because that's what's keeping them together. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But once we're gone, that's when chaos is going to be unleashed on them. All right? So, we are going to move to our first point. So I'm going to play a video, and we're going to go over their tactics, okay? So just bear with me.
So I don't know. You know who Tiberius Julius Alexander is? He was one of the generals.
Titus.
Yeah. He was He was a half Jew, half Egyptian.
Philo's nephew.
Philo's nephew. Yes. The nephew of Philo, the great philosopher, Jewish philosopher. Anyways, this guy was fighting against the Jews in the war in 70 AD. He was standing there watching the destruction of his people's temple and was like, yeah, cheering it on. Like, this is the type of Jewish, Greek-speaking Jewish people that became Christianity. They claim Israel descent. They're proud of that. I'm Israel all day long, but they're like, I don't care about the temple. I care about
the Essenes were celebrating I think Pompey taking the temple as well. Taking Jerusalem. They hated the temple and the Jewish establishment as well.
It's like when you go to Brooklyn, the Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn who are railing against Zionism. Like, what the hell? You ever see those demonstrations?
Yeah.
Yep. That's what it's like. But so like Christians were like that. They were Hellenistic. They were Greek speaking. They liked the philosophers like Plato and Pythagoras. That's why you find the sentences of Pythagoras found in the Nag Hammadi collection. They found Pythagorean works, Platonist works. Plato's Republic was there, among other Christian texts. But they can't stand like Jewish custom or the laws of Moses or circumcision and all this dorky stuff. I can't stand you. Pharisees are weird. That's the type of Jew that became Christianity.
All right, so these guys made a lot of claims, and the thing is, they don't have any sources to back up anything. Show me the proof that these Jews created Christianity. So they're accusing this Tiberius Julius Alexander of being the kind of Jew who created Christianity to infiltrate the West, right, and to destroy your pagan foundation. And now nothing he said was true. So let's look at some of the claims that this guy made. So he claimed that Tiberius was half Jewish and half Egyptian. He cheered when the temple in Jerusalem burned down. It was pagan Jews like Tiberius who invented Christianity. And I want you to think about how insane this is, that it's like they're accusing the Jews of playing like a 10D or 100D chess game, where during this time, the Jews were the most powerful people in the world. They had the most fortified city in the world, richest people. They were a force to be reckoned with. They controlled academia in Egypt. And now what they're claiming is that the Jews self-sacrificed themselves. They orchestrated this whole destruction of their own temple, destruction of their people. Almost a million of them were killed, sold into slavery, women raped, priesthood destroyed, temple burnt down. And this was all their 10D strategy. That if we play our cards right after we sacrifice everything we have and then go run into the desert to write our Talmud, if everything goes right, in 2,000 years from now, we'll be able to come back and rebuild the city, and the whole world will be, tricked and deceived into worshiping our Christian scam. Like that is insane. And I would like, they have no sources or proof. That is their theory based on insanity, okay? Now, nothing he said was true. There are no sources to back up anything he said. Tiberius Julius Alexander, the reason I like him is because I like to point at him as an example of how a Jew could be a Roman. Okay, understand who Tiberius was. Tiberius Julius Alexander saved the Roman Empire. He was a Jew who forsook his Jewish religion, forsook his people, and became a Roman, fought against his own people, put down Jewish revolts, and he was the head general under Titus who destroyed Jerusalem. And there is no proof that the Romans hated Christians. There's no proof that Tiberius had anything to do with Christianity. He was a Jew who wanted to be Roman, and he was. And in contrast to Tiberius, shortly after him, we have Rabbi Akiva, the greatest rabbi in all of history, who was not a Jew. He was a Gentile who converted to Judaism and became the rabbi of rabbis and the biggest enemy to the Roman Empire. So I like to use him as an example of how this isn't really about DNA. That plays a role. I mean, obviously, if you're a Jew or a Roman, chances are, if you're Jewish, you're going to be pro-Jewish, and chances are you're going to be, if you're Roman, Greek or whatever, you're going to be pro that. But here's an example of a Jew who saved the Roman Empire. If Tiberius sided with anyone else, or he could have proclaimed himself Caesar, but he didn't. He surrendered his legions to the man he thought was best, which was Vespasian, and ordered his legions to serve him. And as the Roman in charge of Egypt, he controlled the Roman food supply. Okay? So Tiberius could have done anything he wanted, and most men would have proclaimed themselves Caesar themselves. But this Jew sacrificed his own ego, put everything aside, and proclaimed Vespasian the next Caesar, when everyone else was proclaiming themselves to be Caesars. And so this Jew saved the Roman Empire. And meanwhile, a Gentile, Rabbi Akiva, was the biggest enemy to the Roman Empire and is the most beloved rabbi in history. Okay? Moses was not a rabbi. So if anyone says Moses was never a rabbi, show me that verse. Okay? They don't know what a rabbi is. So when we go to the sources, was Tiberius half Egyptian? And the answer is no. We don't know for sure. But based on the sources, we have a 90% chance he wasn't, okay? So what we do know about him, he's a footnote in history, guys, and that's another tactic about these guys. They are now talking about absolute truth, Tiberius this, Tiberius that, but he's a footnote in history. We're going to go over pretty much every single quote in history about this guy, and they've constructed this whole narrative based on nothing, okay? So what we have in Josephus is, then came Tiberius Alexander as successor to Phaedus, and he was the son of Alexander the Alabarch of Alexandria, which Alexander was a principal person among his contemporaries, both for his family and wealth. He was also more eminent for his piety than his son Alexander. His son Alexander forsook the Jewish faith and became a Roman. But he was religious. He was pious. Now, if you're the Alabarch, the leader, he's the mayor of the Jews. He's the highest Jew in Egypt. Okay? He's the brother of Philo of Alexandria, the famous Jewish philosopher. Now, for him to be the leader of the Jewish community in Egypt, and he's religious, he's pious, do you think he married an Egyptian woman? And if he did, do you think that Egyptian woman didn't convert to Judaism? Of course she would have had to. At this time, this is when they brought in the law that you're Jewish through your mother. So Tiberius, there's nothing here that suggests Tiberius was half Egyptian. If anything, it suggests he was a full Jew. I don't believe his father, a religious man, known for his piety and for his religion, would have married a non-Jewish woman. Whether convert or not, it's irrelevant. Because in Orthodox Judaism, Pharisaic Judaism, a convert holds 100% Jewish status. Okay? You could be like me. I'm half Jewish through my father. And so I'm a 0% Jew. 0% Jew in the Orthodox circles. But if you convert to Judaism, you are 100% Jew. Okay, the synagogue I went to, I was not allowed to read from the Torah. I was banned because I wasn't a Jew. It didn't matter who my father was. It didn't matter who my grandfather was. The point was my mother was French, Canadian, Irish, Roman Catholic. And that barred me from being a Jew. But if you convert, the converts in that synagogue read from the Torah. And there were a lot. There was at least like 5 to 10% of the people in that synagogue were converts. They were 100% Gentiles, Goyim. And they were reading from the Torah. They were 100% Jews in that synagogue. But the guy descended, was not. So, the odds that his father married a non-Jewish woman is 0%. Okay, in my opinion. I'd say 0%. If he was a religious man, leader of the... So, where did you get this idea? What is your source that he was half Egyptian? Doesn't exist. Okay, that's just... He threw that out there. Okay, did he cheer when the temple in Jerusalem burned down? Okay. But Titus said, so now we're going to read War of the Jews. But Titus said that although the Jews should get up upon the holy house and fight us from there, yet ought we not to revenge ourselves for the things that are inanimate instead of the men themselves. Okay, so he was not in any case for burning down so vast a work, talking about the temple, as that was, because this should be mischief to the Romans themselves. Titus was not for burning the temple, okay? He wanted to save the temple. And then when he goes and talks to his generals, okay, it says that Alexander, okay, grew bold upon that declaration and agreed to the opinion of Titus. So when Titus said, we should save the temple, okay? It was the greatest building in the Roman Empire at this time. It was the most beautiful temple. Jerusalem was the jewel of the Roman Empire. And Alexander, so the sources don't say Alexander cheered when the temple was destroyed. It doesn't say he wanted to destroy the temple. The only source we have says that he grew bold upon the declaration and agreed to the opinion of Titus that they should try to save the temple. That's it, guys. That's the only source we have. So the only source we have says the complete opposite of what this guy just claimed. Okay? But instead now, the image that they're painting in the pagan's head or the atheist's head is that Jews like him wanted to destroy the temple. They wanted to get rid of all this stuff because they have a Jewish trick to enslave the world with Christianity. It's just not here, guys. It's the opposite. It says he boldly agreed with Titus that they should try to save the temple. Okay? Did pagan Jews like Tiberius invent Christianity? Okay? These are the only other sources we really have on the guy. On the day appointed, Tiberius Alexander, a distinguished Roman knight, sent to assist in the campaign. Now, this is Tacitus talking about the wars in Parthia. Has nothing to do with inventing Christianity. It's talking about Tiberius was a great soldier. And whatever he did in the Persian wars, the Parthian wars, he distinguished himself. They went, wow, this Jew is loyal to Rome. This Jew is a fighter. This Jew did something. He got some kind of medal of honor, some kind of bronze star, something. And then we have Tacitus again saying, the initiative in transferring the empire to Vespasian was taken at Alexandria under the prompt direction of Tiberius Alexander, who on the 1st of July made the legions swear allegiance to him. That day was ever after celebrated as the first of his reign. So all we have now is that Vespasian really owes and Rome owes everything to this Jew, who made his legions declare Vespasian, put his ego aside, and said, let's save the empire. And then he went as a Jew and destroyed his own people. And I think he is such a fascinating character in history that we have this Jew who put the empire first, put Rome first, and sacrificed everything he loved for his duty, for his honor, for Rome. Rome was saved by this Jew, 100%. Okay? And that's, now there is some conflict. Tacitus does write that Titus himself was convinced that the temple ought to be destroyed in order that the Jews and the Jewish and Christian religions might be more completely abolished. Notice that. It doesn't say they wanted that Christianity was their trick. It says that to stop Christianity, Titus said the temple should be destroyed, to stop both Judaism and Christianity. Then it goes to say, for although these religions are opposed to each other, they're enemies of each other, they both sprang from the same origins. Okay? The temple, however, was so famous that it would surely be preserved if left standing. Accordingly, some of his advisors suggested giving it over to destruction. Now, both can be true, guys. I want you to understand that just because Tacitus says Titus himself was convinced that the temple ought to be destroyed, versus Titus saying, Josephus recording the opposite, saying that Titus tried to save the temple. Understand that they can both be true, in the sense that in the moment and in the battle and in the fight, Titus was like, we should save the temple for Rome. It's a prized jewel of the Roman Empire. Don't destroy it. And Tiberius was in agreement. But then after the war, when you read what happened after the temple was destroyed and how hard the Jews fought and how annoying they were and how deceptive and cunning, I'm sure Titus eventually went, you know what? It's a good thing it was destroyed. Okay? I'm sure Titus in the moment, during the battle, when all that was going on, was in favor of keeping the temple. And by the time the war was finally over, I am sure Titus was like, man, after all we went through, even after Jerusalem was destroyed, the war continued. The Jews kept fighting. Man, is it a good thing that temple was destroyed. I'm sure both are true, guys. Just because they seem to conflict. In the moment, it was probably one thing, and then after the war, it was probably another. Because the war continued. The Jews never gave up. And it was probably a good thing that it was destroyed. But the point is, Christianity to the Romans was a terrible thing. There's no way Tiberius looked at Christianity like a good thing, and it's my trick to enslave the Roman world. It's insane. All right? I hope that makes sense. I think we can now move on to the next point. Again, guys, I really apologize for how long this is going to be, but it is what it is.
I mean, I remember there's a documentary called Zeitgeist. Ever heard of that?
No.
It's this documentary that these people put together where they try to make this claim, and I believed it at the time when I saw this. This is how uneducated I was at the time when I first saw this documentary, that Jesus is just like a copy of Attis, of Mithras, of Dionysus. It's not true. At the time,
I never heard this before.
Yeah, that's it right there. It was a huge. It blew up. It was, what is it? 2007 when that came out.
It was a series.
Yeah, there was 3 of them. But the first part of that documentary was about religion, and it went through this like completely off. It was not sound academically. Like, this guy was just like basically saying all the gods are the same. They all had 12 disciples. They were all born on December 25th. They all were crucified, which is not true. But the reason why I even brought that up in this discussion is because this, for some reason, took over on the internet. And you see people posting memes about this stuff. Even to this day, during Christmas time, you'll see the memes where it says, Mithras had 12 disciples. Dionysus, born on December 25th.
Everyone likes to simplify it these days.
So, but it poisoned the discourse a little bit. So when I get into like James Frazier, and when I actually do bring up actual examples, for example, let me just give you one, just on a quick detour and come back to this.
Do whatever you want, bro. Your show. Let's go.
Well,
all right, I want to stop just for a second So if you guys aren't familiar with the movie Zeitgeist really helped me in becoming a Christian. It was this lie of a movie, of a documentary. It was viral back in the day. And it really was completely based on lies and books that weren't true, books that have been completely debunked, saying exactly what he said. He's admitting, Zeitgeist did a lot of bad for us because in the end, everything in the movie was a lie. The lie went halfway around the world, and then the truth put on its shoes. And now what this guy's going to do is he's about to do Zeitgeist 2.0. He's now going to refine the Zeitgeist argument. He's now going to make claims that Christianity is mythicism. It's all the Christians did. Jews like Tiberius took myths from the Greeks and then created the whole Jesus myth. And Jesus is actually based on Greek, Phrygian, pagan mythology. Okay, so we're going to let him finish. And this guy is a liar. I'm sorry. He knows the sources. He's for me, there's no other way for me to paint this guy. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to, name call. But for me, the guy has clearly checked the sources and he knows he's a liar. Okay?
There was a religious ritual that the Romans performed called the Hilaria.
The Hilaria.
Yeah, Hilaria. Hilaria.
Like Hilaria Baldwin.
It means in Latin. It means to rejoice. Hilaria. We get the word hilarious from that.
Yeah.
Hilarity. And in this festival, they during the spring equinox, so right around March 25th, they bring out an effigy of the god Attis. He's dead. Mm-hmm. They pin him onto a tree, on a pine tree, and they bury the pine tree, and they mourn for 3 days, and then they rejoice of his resurrection after 3 days. Now,
and when does this trace back to?
So there's a debate. There's people debate this. There's the primary sources claim so John the Lydian writes this, and then Robert Turkin wrote a book called Cults of the Roman Empire, and he says that all the evidence points to the reign of Claudius, which would be in like the 40s AD. So it's like around the same time Christianity is before the Gospels.
Right.
But it's like contemporary with the rise of Christianity.
Wow.
But but just to cover myself here and just to be fair and give the nuance, a lot of the.
Okay, so this is where you kind of know, because he's like, I need to cover myself here. We don't know who's taking from who here. And it's not true. We know exactly who's taking from who because we have the sources. We have all the records, right? So the fact that he's stopping and saying, well, let me cover myself because I'm now about to lie to your faces and pull a Zeitgeist 2.0. Let's go.
There's a lot of scholars who go, well, they have the actual details about the 3 days and all that stuff comes in later sources. So some people think that they're borrowing from Christians or borrowing from each other in some way. But either way, we have sources that say the Hilaria starts with Claudius in the 40s AD. By the time you get to Marcus Aurelius, we know for sure that the festival was in full swing because he adds a day to the festival called the Day of Washing.
What's he, 160, 170, 180?
160s, yeah. So, exactly, 161, I think.
AD.
Yeah. So this would be in the middle of the 2nd century. So now we're talking, okay, so at the very least, this cult is contemporaneous with the rise of Christianity.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I brought that up is because that's an actual example that I'm not making up from the sources. That's real. It's there. We can debate it. We can talk about who's borrowing from who, but it's real. Zeitgeist, on the other hand, is just kind of throwing out these random, Mithras had 12 disciples based on nothing. So when I do talk about Hilaria, what happens is I'll get comments going, this is Zeitgeist nonsense. And I'm like, none of this is even in Zeitgeist, but Zeitgeist was so damaging to the discourse that whenever you make any argument that's even close to what sounds like Zeitgeist, they immediately they just label it Zeitgeist.
Yeah, they can label you like they say conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
And
All right, so This guy knows the sources. Like, I don't believe for a second that this guy hasn't checked anything, but it doesn't matter. This guy has just gone on a podcast, a platform that has like 1 million subscribers. This Julian Dory guy is pretty big, and very few people are actually going to go and check the sources. And that's the trick with these guys. All you have to do really with these guys is 9 out of 10 times is just go check the sources. Okay, and we're going to see that with another example right after. But we're going to check the sources, okay? Now, Odysee is this ridiculous, stupid god, not even a god he's just a normal guy. We're going to see it, but what he turned into was this transgender god. Really what you're seeing in the liberal movement today, the trans movement, the homosexual movement, the LGBTQ, that's what he's pushing. And he's pushing you all back to paganism, right? Odysee, like the priests of Odysee were all transgender. They were all men who self-castrated themselves and then walked around dressed as women. And then it had to do with also orgies and stuff like this. It's the LGBTQ stuff we're seeing right now. And anyways, they want to push you towards this god that's insane, and then they want you to reject the God of the Bible and Christ, the Son of God, who rose up against the Pharisees, rose up against the Orthodox Jews, rose up against the Jewish bankers. The guy who defended the poor, the guy who sacrificed his life for us, I would rather, even if Christ was a myth, let's pretend he was, I would much rather serve the myth of Christ, the Son of God, the King who came down to die for his subjects, versus the kings of the earth who fabricate wars and send us to go die for them in their wealth. I would rather serve the lie of Jesus, the king who died for his people, the king who walked among the people, the king who got on his hands and knees and washed people's feet, the king who showed mercy. I would rather serve the myth of Christ than the men that we're going to replace him with, that will fabricate wars and say, go die for me and my money. So let's look at the sources. The earliest source we have of Odysee is Herodotus. And when you read the myth, okay, Odysee is the son of King Croesus. Odysee is a human prince. He is accidentally killed by a spear thrown during a boar hunt. There's no resurrection. That's it. So the earliest source we have. Now the biggest source we have, Catullus, written in, now look at the dates, 440 BC. This would have been written, say, 54 BC, maybe 60 BC. And this is our most complete Republican era source. Odysee is a Greek youth who travels to Phrygia, driven mad by the goddess Sibyl. In a frenzy, he castrates himself with a sharp flint. There's no death, there's no resurrection. So this was the myth, the popular myth going around during the time of Christ. And he's just a lunatic guy who regrets transgendering, regrets cutting off his bits, and it remains a slave serving Sibyl in her forest. It's a terrible story. Not even close. Ovid writes during the lifetime of Jesus, but before his ministry, Odysee is unfaithful to Sibyl. She drives him mad. He castrates himself and dies. That's it. Now, Pausanias writes, writing well after the Gospels were written, Pausanias recounts a version where Odysee is killed by a boar, okay, linking him to Adonis. Zeus grants a wish to Aegisthus, to Sibyl, that Odysee's body should not rot or decay. Guys, it's the same thing. It's not until later, when the Christians are now commenting on the pagans, that the Christians are right. The heir of the pagan religion, okay, this is Firmicus Maternus, he describes the Hilaria festival where pagans mourn in effigy and then the lights are brought in, okay? And this is where So this is the first and only mention of a salvation message linked to Odysee. It appears 300 years. 300 years. Put that into perspective. That would be like the 1700s from us. That's the distance. That would be like me writing a myth, right, of something 300 years. Now I'm changing the story. 300 years, guys. That's insane. It appears 300 years after Christianity exploded. Historians view this as a reactionary adaptation of paganism trying to offer the same salvation product that Christianity was offering. So who's borrowing from who here? What are your sources? He did not mention a single source in that video because he knows he has none. But the lie has gone halfway around the world. We're losing the battle. But the Peter Joseph effect, the Zeitgeist effect, the guy who made the Zeitgeist video is a laughingstock because this whole video was a lie. Okay, and that's what's probably going to happen to these guys down the road. So now we're going to talk about the Temple of Vesta. So we're going to play another video and we're going to go over what he says about, again, setting fires, throwing stones, causing infighting. That is their job. Okay?
Did you even know how bad it was? There was a fire called the Temple of Vesta, where the fire was lit. Fire of Vesta. Guess how long it was lit for? When the Christian Theodosius in 395 shut it down. Guess how long it had been lit for? 1,000 years.
Oh,
They had a 1,000-year lit fire that the ancestors were constantly kept lit for 1,000 years. From 750 BC at the time of supposedly Romulus, all the way up until that 395 AD, the Temple of Vesta was lit, and they smothered that shit. The Christians did. And guess what happened to Rome after that? Rome fell within half of a century.
And
I just want to stop it there. I want you guys to notice that the guy, Adam Green here, is not saying, what's your source? What are your sources for that? See, Paul is going to be fake. The Apostle Paul is fake. But when it comes to them quoting pagan sources, they never once go, what's your source on that? You made a really big claim here, man. You made a huge claim. So what are your sources on that? And you're going to see it's a double standard. When it comes to anything the pagans write, it's 100% true. But Christianity's fake and a myth. You know, we'll go over that.
they say that then they built Western civilization when
They destroyed it.
they destroyed it, and so much of Western civilization's rooted in Greco-Roman world and paganism.
And when that happened, when he did extinguish the fire of Vesta and shut down the Olympics and close down all the temples of the ancient mysteries and shut down libraries, when they did all that stuff, at that point in time, the Christians only made up 5 to 10, maybe 25% at higher estimates of the empire, which means the majority of the people were still pagan, and paganism didn't lose out. Your ancestors didn't convert because of how great Christianity was. They were socially forced to become Christians, and slowly over generations, over 3 or 4 generations, they were so forced out of their old ways because they couldn't do any worship things anymore. It was illegal. They're all just became Christians.
It was
Socially
like
forced.
a fringe mob. You know, did you ever watch Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
You know how there was that religious group with like the stars carved in their foreheads?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously based on the Christians and what they did.
Fundamentalists.
The way they were behaving.
Okay, so they're really gaslighting here. After the Temple of Vesta was destroyed, Christianity destroyed the Roman Empire. After they became Christians, it destroyed. They don't talk about any of the facts leading up to the fall of Rome. What happened there, we're going to talk about that. Actually, you know what? Let me hold off. Let me just play another video from them with Paul. Let me just contrast that with Paul. They're not, I just want to show you that the double standard that these guys have. Okay.
Lives.
this scholar saying that Paul's epistles are all forgeries and that Paul never even existed. Really interesting stuff. And I'm already sold, honestly. I say that sarcastically, but like just like with Jesus mythicism, like it's always just been, well, everybody agrees the 7 authentic epistles and he definitely existed, just like they say Jesus definitely existed. But when you actually, the scholar goes and looks at the why they say that, there's nothing there, and in fact evidence that they didn't exist.
Okay, so now they've thrown another stone. Paul's not. They interviewed some doctor with a new book to sell, a PhD teaching at a university. Paul's not real. Paul's fake because, Paul wrote in 55 AD, and the earliest sources we have, the fragments we have of Paul, come 120 years later. Therefore, he's fake. He's all construction. We have no sources from the first century kind of thing. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Temple of Vesta. Actually, before I do that, let me... we're going to talk about... Let me just explain the Vestal Virgins. What is the Temple of Vesta? So the Temple of Vesta was really like the heart of the Roman Empire. And there was a fire there, the eternal fire, which was not eternal at all. The eternal fire represented the heart of Rome, the fire of Rome. And it symbolized like the hearth, the fire in the home that feeds and keeps you warm, cooks your food, allows industry, metal, you can make things with fire. Fire is a cleanser. So they really, what they taught is, as long as the flame of the flame of Vesta is going, Rome is alive. And inside the temple you had an idol of an unknown god. No Roman knew what god was actually in the Temple of Vesta. And the Vestal Virgins were very powerful women in Rome. They were generally taken between the ages of 5 and 10, and they had to serve a 30-year period. And the first 10 years they were students. The next 10 years they were workers, servants of the temple. And then their last 10 years they were now the teachers teaching the next generation of virgins. And they had to be virgins, okay? We're going to go over some of their laws. But if they broke their vow of chastity, they were buried alive. Okay, but a Vestal Virgin had a lot of power. They could vote where women couldn't. They could. They were freed from their fathers. So it's a patriarchal system. And they knew things that even the Pontificate Maximus, the Caesars and the rulers of Rome didn't know. The secrets guarded by the Temple of Vesta. For instance, what god was worshipped there? What was the secret god that was hidden in the temple? And a Vestal Virgin had so much power that if you were, say, a criminal on your way to be executed, and you happen to walk by a Vestal Virgin on your way to be executed, and the Vestal looks at you, you are forgiven of your crime. That's like, these girls had a lot of power. Okay? So that's what the Vestal Virgins are, and that's what the Temple of Vesta was, is the heart of Rome. And the legend is that when Troy fell, Aeneas is really the true founder of Rome. I mean, you've got Romulus and Remus, but they're all descended from the Trojans who fled the Trojan War based off the legend of Aeneas, who went to Carthage and from Carthage went to Rome. And so Aeneas carried with him a wooden idol that he then brought with him to Rome, and that's what's apparently placed in the Temple of Vesta. There's no proof of it. Zero proof that this is real. It's all legend, okay? So that's that. So let's look at the claims that he made. So Christianity destroyed the ancient culture and literature and architecture and history. And he said 1,000-year lit fire that the ancestors were constantly kept lit for 1,000 years, from 750 BC all the way up until that 395 AD. The Temple of Vesta was lit, and they smothered that shit. Guys, nothing he just said there was true. And now what he's done is he's fueled the pagans to hate the Christians even more. He's dividing us with lies, no sources, nothing. Okay? Now, Paul's fake. Let's put things into perspective here. Let's look at the timeline. And what we're looking at here is the event. So this is when, I think his name was Nulla Pompeius. I think. Nullus Pompeius. That was the second king of Rome. The second king of Rome is the guy who established the Temple of Vesta. But guys, notice what's happening here. Livy is the first guy to write this story down. And Livy would have written the story down between, let's say, 20 BC. There are no sources before him talking about, for sure, it's based on legends. Imagine me, imagine you today have to explain, I don't know, let's think of an event, the 700 years ago, maybe the 700 years, the 100 Years' War in England, between England and France. Okay? It's about 700 years ago. The 100 Years' War, the Battle of Agincourt, Henry V, Edward the Dark Knight, the Dark Prince, these people, if you know that. It would be like, imagine you are now have to write all about that stuff 700 years ago. Imagine you don't have the internet, you don't have Google, you don't have ChatGPT or any of this stuff. You now have to write a story. Guys, that's what's happening here. Okay, so Livy is way after the fact of the event. And now he's writing it down for the first time. 720 years. So that's from the event, from when the temple started to the time it's first written down, is 720 years. Now, we have a 270-year gap for the earliest fragment of Livy. And it's not very, I don't think it's very big. And then we have 900 years for the full manuscript. So it's like 1,100-year-old manuscript with the earliest. Okay, do you see this? Now let's look at Plato. Plato would have written in 360 BC. The earliest fragment we have of Plato is in 250 AD. Sorry, guys, that should say 250. I think it's 250 BC. Forgive me on that one. It's 250 BC, roughly, that we have the earliest fragment of Plato. Okay, it's pretty good. It's like about 100 years difference. But then the full manuscript of Plato, and it's a tiny fragment. It's not a big manuscript. It's a tiny little fragment. And then the full manuscript is about 900 AD of Plato. Now let's look at Paul. This is Paul. Paul's writing in 555 AD about, and Paul's fragment is huge. It's almost complete. It's not like a tiny little Plato fragment. It's actually pretty big. And then we just have, so between Paul and his full manuscript is 300 years less. And then we have about 100 years for Paul for his fragment. It's a pretty big, it's a big one too. Paul is fake, guys. Paul's not real. Paul is imaginary. Paul never wrote, this is all fake. But their story, do you guys see the difference, the double standard here? They didn't question their sources. No one was like, well, hang on, how do you know that story is true? What's your source on that? Well, Livy wrote over 700 years after the fact, and he started writing about this. And then his surviving fragment is 270 years apart. And then it's 900 years. 900 AD, 650 years to the complete manuscript. Preserved by Christians. Christians were the ones who saved that. No pagan saved that. It's amazing that when the Christians were illegal and going through times of persecution, they managed to keep all their books, despite the empire being attacking them. But when Christianity took over, pagan Christianity, Roman Christianity, no pagan managed to keep their stuff alive. They had to fully rely on the Christians to keep all the pagan sources going. Right? Christians destroyed everything, but the Christians preserved everything. I don't know which one it is, guys. But that's my point. Do you guys see the double standard? That they didn't question their sources, but they're now going to look at Paul. Look at Paul's sources. Look at how close together they all are. And then look at Livy, writing over 700 years after the fact, guys. Come on. Okay? All right. So the next thing is Christianity fell. Christianity destroyed the Roman Empire. The thing is, the problem with this is Rome was divided into two empires, East and West, Byzantium, Constantinople, and Rome. Why is it that both East and West became Christian? Only the West fell, and the more Christian empire stayed alive for over 1,000 years. For 1,000 years after the West fell. I want you to think about this. If Christianity caused the Western Empire to fall, and Christianity is the reason, why did Christianity survive 1,000 years more, stronger than ever in the East? Christianity is the problem, guys. Christianity destroyed Rome. It didn't destroy Rome. Rome survived in the East for 1,000 years. It fell in the West. Why did it fall in the West? They didn't tell you how the pagans had destroyed the empire, and that by the time the Christians, and they're very pagan Christians, it's not like they had Christianity figured out yet, they inherited a destroyed empire. It was on fumes. The dinar was worthless. The pagans leading up to Christians taking over were engaged in so many civil wars. Guys, in a span of 50 years, before I think Diocletian came, it's called the Barracks Emperors, because they went through 26 emperors, I think, 26 emperors in a span of 50 years. Every 2 years you had a new emperor, less, on average. They were murdering each other, and only one of those emperors, I think, died of natural causes. Every other one was killed and replaced with another one. And Rome, the pagans had spent so much of their money, devalued their money to nothing in pagan civil wars, that by the time the Christians took over, the empire was already gone. And it had to fall and collapse. And that's when the nations were born. France comes in, and England with the Saxons and the Germans, and then okay? And now nationalism is born. Again, Rome is not a nationalist entity. Rome is an empire that destroys nations and absorbs you and makes you a citizen. It's not like Christianity, where when Rome fell was the first time nations could actually be born. France, all these nations that are alive today, if you're French, if you're English, if you're Scottish, if you're Irish, if you're German, Polish, whatever, you are only those things because the Roman war machine, the empire that stamped out nations and wiped out pagan tribes, was stopped. It fell, and from it grew these nations. Okay? Thanks to Christianity. All right? So don't blame, if Christianity was the reason Rome fell, why did it survive 1,000 years more in the East? Do you see? All right. All right, so the Temple of Vesta, the sack of Rome. So let's go to the sources, guys. Did the Christians destroy the Temple of Vesta? Is that what the sources say? Is that what history says? Let's go through it. The eternal myth, okay? The skeptics claim the Christians destroyed Rome by extinguishing the eternal flame, but history proves the flame was never eternal. Okay? The first destruction in 390 BC, the pagan Gauls sacked Rome. So the claim, the flame was harmed. It was lit from 750 BC all the way to the time the Christians smothered it. And yet here, the first destruction was pagans who destroyed the Temple of Vesta. Okay? The Vestal virgins fled, bearing the sacred objects in jars to save them. The temple and the city were burned to the ground. The irony. The first people to extinguish the fire and destroy the temple weren't Christians, they were fellow pagans. The eternal flame failed to protect Rome from its own neighbors 400 years before Jesus was born. So Livy writes about the abandonment, and then he goes to write that the Gauls rushed into the forum, then having looted the houses, they set fire to them. The crash of falling houses and the shouting of the enemy filled everything with dreadful noise. The temple was destroyed, the flame was extinguished about 390, maybe 394, somewhere in there BC by the Pagans. The Pagans came and destroyed the temple. All right? The Great Fire of 241. So a massive fire swept through Rome, destroying the Temple of Vesta. The Pontificate Maximus Lucius Caecilius Metellus had to dive into the burning building to save the Palladium. This is the wooden idol that Aeneas, the legend goes, brought, I don't know, in 1000 BC or something, 1100 BC, brought to Rome, this temple of Athena. Now, nobody knows it's Athena. I think it would have been Minerva or Athena. And nobody knows it yet, though. He blinds himself, hurts himself in the process. So the temple is destroyed again in another fire. Oh, how frightened the Senate were, or I guess the Senate was, when the temple of Vesta caught fire and the goddesses was almost buried under her own roof, because the building collapsed. But the senator went in. Okay, the Pontificate Maximus apparently went in and rescued it before the building fell and collapsed. Okay, so the Romans, by accident, by whatever reason, destroyed their own temple, guys. But it was the Christians who extinguished this 1,000-year-old flame. Okay. All right. And notice, Pontificate Maximus. So this is actually the same title the Pope has today. Interesting. So the skeptics claim Vesta protected Rome, yet in 241 BC, when a massive fire swept through the city, Vesta couldn't stop it. She couldn't even save herself. She was buried under her own, buried under her own roof, and had to be saved by a human man who blinded himself to do what the goddess couldn't, and that was protect the sanctuary. Christian's fault, guys. The arson plot of 210 BC. Again, pagan saboteurs, the Campanians from Capua in south of Rome, deliberately tried to burn down the temple to destroy Rome. A fire broke out in several places at once near the Forum. The Temple of Vesta was with difficulty saved, principally through the help of 13 slaves that were afterward purchased by the states, and they were freed. The fire continued for a night and a day, and no doubt that it was the case of arson. Okay, so noblemen from Capua, they weren't technically Romans, but they were Romans later. They were angry at Rome. So contrary to the claim that the Temple of Vesta was universally revered as the untouchable soul of Rome, historical records show that it was a target for fellow pagans long before Christianity. In 210 BC, pagan Campanian nobles deliberately committed arson, setting fire to the temple, not as a religious act, but as a political revenge against Rome. The eternal flame did not miraculously protect itself. The temple was barely saved after burning for a night and a day, only through the desperate labor of 13 slaves. This proves that to Rome's own pagan neighbors, Vesta was not a sacred protector, but a military target to be destroyed. All right. Guys, it keeps going. 64 AD, the Great Fire of Nero. During the infamous Fire of Nero, the Temple of Vesta was completely reduced to ash. It had to be rebuilt from scratch. So to count the mansions and blocks of houses ruined would be difficult. Simpler to state is the destruction of the temples. The shrine of Vesta with the household gods of the Roman people were all were burnt. Nero destroyed the Temple of Vesta, guys. Christians did it. So the narrative that the Christians destroyed a pristine 1,000-year-old sanctuary is historically impossible because the original temple did not survive that long. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, the Great Fire of 64 AD completely consumed the holy place of Vesta, along with the sacred household gods, the penance of the Roman people. This total destruction proves that the ancestral temple skeptics mourn was actually lost to pagan incompetency under Nero centuries earlier. The building later closed by Christians was merely a reconstruction, not the original. All right. And again, in 191 AD, under Commodus, the famous Commodus, the guy from Gladiator, Movie's not really accurate. A massive fire destroyed the temple again. The Vestals fled, and for the first time in history, the secret Palladium was exposed to the public sunlight, breaking the sacred law. So the whole Temple of Peace was destroyed. The fire spread to the Temple of Vesta. The image of Pallas, Athena, Minerva probably, Palladium, which the Romans worship in secret and which had never been seen by the people, was now exposed to public view. The Vestal virgins took the image and fled along the sacred way to the imperial palace. Okay, so the claim that Christians were the ones to desecrate a sacred mysteries of Rome is historically false. In 191 AD, under the pagan Emperor Commodus, a massive fire consumed the temple, forcing the Vestal virgins to flee into the streets, clutching the sacred Palladium. Herodian, the historian, explicitly recorded that the event broke the most sacred law of the cult, the secret idol of Athena, which no commoner was ever permitted to see, was exposed to public view for the first time in history. The mystical veil of the temple was torn away, not by Christians, but by the failure of the pagan gods to protect their own sanctuary from destruction. Okay? Again. So now this is where it gets even more embarrassing. And again, the guy has already gaslit the pagans. The pagans are already angry. No sources were read. Nothing was done. They just threw something out there. And guess what, guys? More embarrassing. The Eternal Flame was actually a yearly subscription. It was required by law to extinguish and ritually renew every March 1st on Roman New Year's. The laurel branch of the Flamian's house is changed. The Vestal too shines with new fire, that she may start the year fresh. Guys, every single year the fire is extinguished and then relit again. Okay? So we're just going through sources right now. Ovid, Macrobius. On the calends of March, they kindle the fire of Vesta anew, that the year may begin with fresh life. If the fire happens by accident to be put out, it is not to be lighted again or lit again from another fire, but new fire to be gained by drawing a pure unpolluted flame from the sunbeams. So they would have to relight it using the sun. They couldn't use normal, like a fire from somewhere. Guys, not only did the Christians not destroy the temple and extinguish the flame, and the pagans were always doing it several times, but they would redo it every year. The flame was all I don't know what to say. So it wasn't one continuous 1,000-year flame. It was a new fire every spring. Now, we're going to look at punishments. Now, if there are laws to punish the Vestals for the flame going out, that means those laws were probably put there because the Vestals accidentally let the flame go out. So, the punishment for accidental letting the fire die. The fire went out so often due to human error from negligence that there was a standard procedure for whipping the priestess responsible. If the fire was truly magical, it wouldn't need a threat of torture to stay lit. Okay, so here we have Dionysius of Halicarnassus writes, the pontiff would whip the maiden who let the fire go out. Plutarch writes that she that has broken her vow of chastity is buried alive, but she that only suffered the sacred fire to go out is scourged, whipped by the pontificate Maximus. Livy writes, the event, so in 206 there was an event, the fire of the Temple of Vesta went out through the negligence of the Vestal, who was on watch. She was scourged by the order of the pontificate Licinius. So not only did the pagans destroy it over and over again, the temple was destroyed several times. Not only did they relight the fire every year, but we have accounts of Vestal virgins letting the fire go out. But it was the Christians who did it, guys. Gotta hate those Christians. Now we're going to talk about the Renaissance. And I'm just going to play another video. So bear with me, guys. And I'm really sorry this is really long. I'm going to try to end this as soon as possible. So let's play them praising the Renaissance, guys. The Renaissance is when the papacy, Christianity had forsaken, Europe had forsaken Christianity and become pagans again. All the Christian leaders, the popes, all were pagans, and it led to 400 years of civil war in Europe. That's what the Renaissance gave birth to. It gave birth to the Reformation, where the Christians were like, no, we're not putting up with this degeneracy. The orgies you're having, okay? They're having orgies in churches. Priests own brothels. It's homosexuality's rampant. Guys, the Renaissance was it's only good if you like paganism, okay? Christians were being burned alive for reading the Bible in their own language.
Century, no one's educated anymore. No one has any time for, like, there was like this in the pre-Christian world. You get the pre-Socratics, the Platonists, the Pythagoreans. There's Stoics. There's the Epicureans. They're all like in their own philosophical angles, going at it, duking it out. And there was competing ideas, and it made for growth, made for competition in the marketplace of ideas. Whereas when you have one idea that everyone has to believe or you're going to burn in hell, that's dogma. That literally quenches, it retards. It's a retardation of society.
St. John Chrysostom gloated that the writings of the Greeks had been obliterated. Imagine celebrating that. I got another one too, the dark side of Christian history as well. And people will deny, and then they'll gaslight and deny the Dark Ages. They'll say, actually, science and education and the Western world's all built by Christianity.
Right.
And we would be nothing, and we would have no morals without the Bible.
Right.
And
there were just a bunch of orgiastic, cannibalistic barbarians before Christianity came along. It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
The same ideas of piety, the same ideas of being a God-fearing, good citizen. You find this in the ancient pagan writers like the Pythagoreans and some of these Middle Platonist writers, some of these Stoic writers. You get the same ideas of pietists. They didn't introduce any of that stuff to anything. In fact, what made the Renaissance so great, because I admit the Renaissance was great. I'm not like a Gibbon historian that thinks things got better because of the Enlightenment. No, I think things were getting better under the Renaissance because they were willing to go back to the Greeks, because they were willing to go outside of Christianity. They said, no more of this iconoclasm, death of art thing. Let's open up the arts. Let's build idols again. Let's draw Bacchus and Aphrodite, go back to Homer and paint those classics on and make new sculptures. That's what the Renaissance was. That's why it's called a rebirth, not a new birth, a rebirth. And that was what they were doing. They were going, even Dante, that's what made the Renaissance so good, is they got away from Christianity. Christianity didn't do anything to give us the Renaissance.
No, they'll be like, oh, we couldn't have built these nice buildings without the Bible, as if the Bible teaches anything about architecture or instructs anything about building churches. As
if these people have never seen Halicarnassus before, or like the depictions of Halicarnassus.
All right, now I'm gonna play one more video because I just want you guys to get, again, we're gonna watch how these spiritual nomads will change what they're saying based upon their audience. Okay, so here he's going on about the same level of piety and holiness existed with the pagans, that Christianity didn't give any of that stuff. And the writings of John Chrysostom, like John Chrysostom went over this in another video. He's clearly talking about how Zeus was a rapist, and Zeus was a child molester. He was a child rapist. He was a homosexual. He raped little children. And Apollo did the same. And they married their sisters. And it's like the Greek gods are so evil and degenerate. And we're going to go over this in the next video when we talk about Hellenism, okay? And the Greek world, and how the Greeks were actually the imperial, like everything our world is today with the spread of liberalism and stuff is no different than what the Greeks were actually doing. And notice how he starts quoting like the Pythagoreans and the Neoplatonists and stuff. Like these guys had to come in. Like I'm pretty sure Pythagoras, as the legend goes, he was killed like Socrates. Socrates was killed because he opposed the gods. Okay, Pythagoras, I'm pretty sure, was killed by an angry mob. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure. It's sources on Pythagoras aren't 100%, but it was the pagans who killed these people because they were defending their degenerate gods, and then these philosophers rose up in opposition to paganism. A lot of them. And like the Neoplatonists again are like, by the time the Torah is out, by the time the Greeks are now interacting with other nations, they're kind of like, oh my God, like we can't be teaching about Zeus. Like Zeus, like our gods are actually so bad. And he's conflating. He's two different things. He's showing you the philosophers who opposed paganism, opposed the mythology. And he's like, see, they're the same thing. And it wasn't orgies and all that stuff. But now watch what he says to his Jewish rabbi.
Well, something interesting happens with the history of the Jewish people that is impacting the world. I just want to say this real quick. So, first wave of Judaizing the Greek world happens obviously after Alexander the Great, and the Septuagint gets produced, and all of a sudden the Greeks can read it, and they're very interested in it. You have Jews in Alexandria who are Greek, and they're reading the Septuagint, but then another event happens in 192 BCE. You have Antiochus III. 2 million Jewish people were relocated to the Greek world, to Europe, Asia Minor. And what happened as a result of that? Did they all become Greek worshippers of Dionysus and start having orgies and do all that? No, it was the other way around. People saw the piety and the humbleness of these Jewish people, and they were very interested in it. The Pythagoreans and the Orphics and the Platonists, these people this is the type of religion that we're looking for. And they mixed, and you get this sort of, and so Jewish culture influences the same way Greeks do to the Romans. It goes the other. It's very fascinating.
So do you guys see how sick and twisted this is? This is what made the Renaissance great, he said, is they got away from Christianity. They went back to Bacchus, Dionysius, Aphrodite, Dionysus, the drunken degenerate, Bacchus, Aphrodite, the adulteress. And then he goes with his Jewish rabbi friend, the rabbi who calls for the destruction of the West, the destruction of our home, guys. Understand that that's who this guy's talking to. He's talking with a rabbi who openly calls about wiping us out. That's his friend. And they're all in agreement here, all these guys. So when it comes to the rabbi, do you see the Jews were good? Judaism good, Christianity bad. Look at the good influence it had. All the philosophers looked at Judaism and wow, this is the opposite of the pagan orgies and all the debauchery that we're dealing with because of our gods. And Judaism comes along and the philosophers just love it. Why? Because the philosophers were fighting their own people. They were fighting their own mythology. They were like, we can't actually. Plato's like, we can't do this. Zeus has no place in our republic. So here's the double standard, guys. When he's talking to the pagans to fire them up, Christianity's bad, it's evil. Guys, we need to go back to the myths. We got to go back to Bacchus and Aphrodite and Zeus and all that stuff. Don't mix the philosophers with mythology. Plato had to come along. Don't mix the Neoplatonists with Greek mythology. Okay? The majority of people believed the myths were real. Okay? This stuff all had to come later when the Greeks were like embarrassed because it's like, oh man, is this what we believe in? This is like, we can't teach this. This is disgusting. The Athenians literally had laws on how to have sex with little boys. All right, so Christians did not destroy the temple. They just stopped paying the bills. So this is why it's so funny that he's going to praise the Renaissance and then attack the Christians for destroying the Temple of Vesta. The destruction of the Vesta cult was a financial decision, not a physical demolishing. The Christian Emperor Gratian simply refused to keep paying for the wood, the food, and the salaries for the Vestals from the public treasury. So the defunding. So Emperor Gratian confiscated the lands and revenues that paid for the Vestal sacrifices. He didn't send a mob to burn it. He just cut the budget. We're not going to pay for the animal sacrifices. We're done with sacrificing animals. That's another thing these pagans will do, is they're like, you believe in blood magic and you believe in sacrifice. No. Christians ended animal sacrifice. We stopped animal sacrifices and blood rituals and all these animals being slaughtered at the temples. These pagans are the ones who believed in blood magic too. Okay? The Bible's sacrifices have nothing to do with blood magic. Nothing to do with blood magic. And I talk about this in another video. I'm not going to get into it now. But notice that it's if we were to revert back to paganism, we're going to have to start doing animal sacrifices again, guys. So they're like, we're done with this stuff. We're moving on. Okay? So now the pagans complain. The treasury detains the lands which were bequeathed to the virgins and officers. With what advantage to your treasury are the prerogatives of the Vestal virgins diminished? They seek for the empty name of immunity, since by their poverty they are exempt from payment. So they're complaining, and now the Christians give an answer why we cut it. Because why should it be cut? Why should the public revenues pay for the rights of heathen temples? Let the earnings of the church be spent on the poor, not on the fire of Vesta, not on the sacrifices, not on keeping the fire going. Let's put the money to good use. The people need it more than some insane ritual that does nothing, never protected Rome, never protected the temple to begin with. So the Christians just stopped paying for it, guys. Now, this is great. When the Emperor Theodosian finally closed the temple in 394 AD, he extinguished the fire and disbanded the order, but the building remained standing, guys. The Temple of Vesta stood relatively intact for centuries after Christianity took over. It was widely documented in the Roman Forum until the Renaissance, when it was stripped for its marble to build neo-pagan palaces, a slow dismantling, not a violent smothering. Okay? I want you to think about what this guy just said, what's really going on here. He made the claim that the Christians destroyed this temple, they put out the fire. Then he goes to praise the Renaissance. Okay, the narrative that early Christians smashed or smothered the Temple of Vesta is historically false. The structure survived the Christian conversion of Rome and stood for over a millennium. It was not until 1549 AD that the temple was physically dismantled by the Farnese Pope Paul III. He stripped the ancient marble not to destroy idolatry, but to reuse the expensive stone for his own pagan palaces, like the Palazzo Farnese and the Gnostic influence project like St. Peter's, the Basilica. The Basilica is a Roman building, guys. It's not Christian. So the Christian Vandals left the temple standing, but the pagan Renaissance destroyed it. Who destroyed so the Christians left the temple there. They just stopped paying the bills, and they're like, we don't want to waste money on sacrifices and the animals and keeping the fire going and paying the salaries for these people for this stupid cult that never did anything to begin with. And then it was the Renaissance popes, the pagan popes, that destroyed Europe and plunged Europe into a 400-year civil war, burning Christians alive for reading the Bible. You could read Plato, you could read Herodotus, you could read Xenophon, you could read Aristotle. No one cared in Europe if you read the pagan, the Greek sources. But if you dared to read the Bible in your own language, the papacy, the popes had you killed. You were charged. Your books, your Bibles were confiscated. While they're having orgies, while homosexuals rampant. It's just like today, guys. That's what the Renaissance was. Okay? And don't say the Renaissance gave birth to all this amazing stuff. That's like saying the LGBTQ movement has given birth to the internet and all the progress that we have in the modern world. The liberals and degeneracy didn't give birth to all the great stuff we have going on today. All that was born from the Renaissance, from the pagan side, was all their statues of the gods, all their orgies and stuff like this. Let's look at an example. Here's the art, okay, the loves of the gods. This is what was built Okay? The central hallway of the Galleria Farnese is not painted with Jesus or the saints. It is covered in the loves of the gods, explicit frescoes of Jupiter, Venus, and Bacchus engaging in drunken orgies and affairs. That's what's good, guys. That's what we need to go back to. That's what's going to save Western civilization. Let's revert back to paganism. Based on what? Pagans destroyed their own temple. The pagans put out that nothing this guy said was true. Not one thing he said was true. And all he did, and then he gives another story to the rabbi. This is their tactics. Nothing these guys say is true. Okay? And if there is some truth in what they're saying, they have, it's like they've just mixed honey with shit. They've got another agenda. Okay? So that's the spiritual nomad. So let's go over. So what he said was Christianity destroyed the ancient culture and literature and architecture and history. Number one, literature. We only have the pagan classics because Christian monks preserved them. If Christians didn't preserve them, they would have rotted away. Christians saved the pagan. All the stuff they're reading today were preserved by the church, by monks, and it's like, but we destroyed it all, guys. Christians destroyed everything. Two, the architecture. The Temple of Vesta survived the Dark Ages intact. It was destroyed in 1549 by the very Renaissance idol builders the skeptics praise. Okay, Christians saved the books. The pagan revival destroyed the building. That's the truth. So 1,000-year lit fire that the ancestors were constantly kept lit for 1,000 years from 700 BC all the way up until 395 AD. The Temple of Vesta was lit and they smothered that shit. That's what they said. And here we've got the Gauls sacked Rome. The fire destroyed the temple. Arson by pagans. Total destruction under Nero and the fire that destroyed it. Okay, the Christian Vandals left the temple standing for a millennium. The enlightened Renaissance tore it down in a week. Okay, so now coming back to where we started. All right. And again, I apologize. This was so long. When we look at these guys, now this is just one rock that they've thrown. They just won't stop. It won't stop. And like I said, it's much easier for them to throw a stone, to tell a lie. And then we have to now do a lot of work to expose what they said. It takes us 10 times longer to refute them than it took them for them to spute something out. Or no, it takes 1,000 times longer. For me to have listened to what he said took a few minutes. The amount of research that I now had to go and do was enormous. And a lot of my time. And this guy is paid. He is backed. He goes to Israel with this rabbi. He studies under the rabbi. He works with the top scholars, PhDs, university people in America, in the world. And all they're doing is spewing out lie after lie after lie. It is Bolshevism 2.0. They are destroying us from within. And again, in any courtroom, the judge, any normal judge would look at these guys and be like, this case is dismissed. Not one of your witnesses agree with each other. You keep bringing witness after witness after witness with a new story, completely different from the other one. It's adjourned. It's a mistrial. You're done. This is so that's the reality here. All right. So this is the spiritual nomad. This is their tactic. Now, I do admit defeat. Okay. Between them controlling the internet, censorship, whether or not, I don't know, I'm just talking about me personally right now, okay? Like, this is a really brutal war to fight. And when you're going up against academia, universities, people with 6-figure incomes, people with unlimited resources, people that are promoted on channel after channel after channel, it's really difficult. It's a really difficult fight. And I do feel like the prophet Jeremiah or like Paul. And And I do admit defeat. This is a battle I cannot win. Now, I do believe in the end I will win the war, because I do believe the truth will put on its shoes, and the lie that's gone halfway around the world will be exposed. And so it's important, you know, my favorite person in history, even more than the Austrian painter, not include, like, I'm not talking about Jesus or Paul or any of these guys or Moses or whatever. I'm talking about in recent history, my favorite man, my hero, is a Russian general, the last commander of the White Russian Army. His name in Russian is Pyotr Wrangel, Peter Wrangel. And the reason I love this man, I don't just love him as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a brave general. I try to draw a lot of my strength, if it's not spiritually through the people in the Bible, it's through him in recent history. And that is because he was a general fighting the Bolsheviks, fighting the spread of communism, atheism, that was massacring Christians. You know, in the end, 30 million Christians were killed. Every church in Europe or in Russia was blown up. Priests and Christians were nailed to barn doors. It was evil. And this man was a general, and his right-hand man was a Jew, actually, named General Yusufovich. And he's Peter Wrangel is recorded saying he couldn't have had a better man than his Jewish general. That was his sidekick. And had Peter Wrangel been in command of the White Army from the beginning of the war, they would have won the war. The communist Reds, the Bolshevik Jews, would have lost. And the problem was the other guys, Denikin, Kolchak, the other leaders, had an ego. They couldn't put their egos aside, like Tiberius Julius Alexander, who willingly sacrificed his position and made Vespasian emperor. When Peter Wrangel was right about every move in that war. And what happened to Peter Wrangel for being right every time? When the commanders were making mistake after mistake after mistake, they kicked him out of the army. He had to leave. And then the leaders of the army, of the White Army, had made so many mistakes now that they resigned from their positions and fled for their lives. They had left the White Army in total disarray. It was over. And what did Peter Wrangel do? He came back. He came back and took command, knowing full well that the battle is over. They have lost. And he took command of a failed army. There was no way now for them to win. Zero chance. And he was now fully aware that the communists were being funded by the West. The West was funding the Red Army, and he now knew it. And he took command of the army anyways, knowing it was over. Because he said, if we're going to go down, we're going to go down with honor. And the Austrian painter, the Germans, picked up the torch that he dropped and took on the fight against globalism, communism, Bolshevism. But Peter Wrangel was the guy, the original fighter of the communists, and took command when all was hopeless, and he knew it. Because I do believe that there's victory in defeat. When I look at the story of Christ, I mean, who would have guessed that 300 years after Christ and the destruction of Jerusalem, Europe would be steps closer to Christianity. It might be a form of pagan Christianity, but they were now on its way and removing all the pagan degeneracy. And so, yeah, I just want to go over some Bible verses, because I can't, I don't know how to say it. I'm fully aware that I can't win this war, or I can't win this battle. My opponents are just too well funded. They have too much power between internet censorship, the academia behind them, the financing. They're paid. They're comfortable. And I do believe that God is going to pull himself out of the West. And once Christianity is successfully destroyed from the West, at least smothered, in Russia, I'm going to tell you something. When the communists won in Russia, the communists won the battle. They did. They blew up all the churches. They killed all the Christians. The clergy had to go underground. But they didn't win the war. Look at Russia today. It is a thriving Christian country. Thriving. And when I was living on the Ukrainian border in Moldova, I said to one night with all my friends, we're at a barbecue, and I started condemning the Soviet Union and saying it was anti-Christian and da 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 da. And my friend Yuri stood up, older guy, old enough to be my dad. And he said, "What are you talking about?" And then he went around the table and he pointed at, and he's like, "Nikolai, are you Christian?" He says, "Yes." "Were you baptized?" "Yes." "Sasha, you?" And then he goes around the table, "Sergey, you?" Yeah. I'm like, he says, "Why is it we were all from the Soviet Union, but we were all baptized?" I said, "Yeah, but it was illegal," I said. I'm like, "It was illegal." And he says, "No, listen. It was a law nobody followed. Even maybe the Communist Party people weren't baptized. But everyone was getting baptized in secret. They never actually got rid of Christianity. Christianity the fire might have gone out. Not like the Temple of Vesta that really went out. The embers were still there. And communism was destroyed and fell in Russia. The Bolsheviks lost the war. They won battle after battle after battle. They thought they had destroyed Christianity, and now it has come back full throttle. They have rebuilt all the big churches. Okay, it might be Orthodox Christianity, very pagan Christianity. It's still better than Bolshevism. And so I believe that the same thing is going to happen to the West, because I'm looking at the battle and I feel like Peter Wrangel. And I just don't have the resources to keep fighting. And my opponents are just stacked. It is what it is. But once Christianity goes, once the Bolsheviks took out Christianity, they all turned on each other. And that's what I think is going to happen to these spiritual nomads, these rabbis, and all these people. Once they lose that common enemy, and Christianity is successfully smothered, at least the flame is down, they're going to turn and kill each other. Okay? They're not going to be so friendly anymore, because they're only united in their hatred for us. And when they're done killing each other, and once they all fail, I believe the embers of Christianity will rise anew. Just like the forest, okay? The forest will burn down, but a new one will grow back even stronger than before. So we're going to go over some Bible verses. And Jeremiah says, "Babylon has a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad." And this is paralleling Revelation, right? Revelation's about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Jeremiah, quoting, the same as Revelation here, is talking about the first destruction of the temple, the first destruction of Jerusalem, okay, with Nebuchadnezzar. And that's what's happened to us. We've become drunk on wine. We've become comfortable, spoiled. We don't know hardship anymore. I'm going to tell you that I didn't have a really easy life compared to most people. And this, especially this last little bit, and this last little bit of hardship that I've gone through has really made me appreciate so many things. And it's really true what they say, that you don't know what you have until it's gone. You take everything for granted. Me, I took hot water for granted until I had to live without hot water or a toilet when I was living in Moldova. Or having an oven or something like this. And then, so you have to lose what you have to realize what you've had. Okay? You don't know what you have till it's gone. And unfortunately for us in the West, we've become so drunk and so spoiled that we're now, through our degeneracy, through our just not appreciating what God has blessed us with, God is going to take it all away from us. So I really believe that that's what's going to happen right now. We're going to continue. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. And they shall wander from sea to sea, and from north even to the east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, and they shall not find it. Because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved, for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. O Lord, my strength and my fortress, and my refuge in the day of affliction, the nations, the Gentiles, shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth, and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things therein wherein there is no profit. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword among all the nations whither the Lord shall lead thee. And I'm going to tell you something, America. I've been living in Europe now for almost 5 years. And we are not liked. Especially towards the east. And actually all across Europe. Europe wants nothing to do with us anymore as Americans. They want to be free from us. They want out of NATO. They don't want to be with us anymore. They don't like us. Believe me, I live here. I know. And that's what's happening to us right now. And if you think, now that wasn't the case before. Before, everyone wanted to go to America. Everyone wanted to be American. We were it. We were what everyone wanted. Okay? And now we're not. We are literally a byword among the nations. We are a proverb. Oh, these fat, stupid, lazy, greedy Americans. Oh, not another American. Guys, we are hated. We are hated. We're going to talk about this more when we get to the Curses of Moses video. How does the city sit solitary that was full of people? How is she become a widow, she that was great among the nations, and the princes among the province? How has she become tributary? Tributary. How have we that used to feed the world, that used to supply the world, that the world would come and borrow from us, and now we owe trillions of dollars, tens of trillions, over $30 trillion to the nations we owe them. How did this happen in such a short time? You see, I feel like Jeremiah. I grew up in the time of Josiah. I grew up in the time of prosperity. I grew up when we had the most powerful army. Life was good. No one locked their doors. It was peace. There were no drugs. If you were smoking weed, you covered in tattoos, you're not getting a job. You smell like weed, it's a big deal back when I was a kid. You get caught with a little joint, So what I think is going to happen is I think God is pulling away. And like I said, I accept my defeat. I accept that I am fighting a war, a battle I cannot win. And my hope is maybe not in my lifetime. I'm still hoping for some kind of revival. God saved the Roman Empire with Vespasian, stopped the Jews. That could happen. But I'm saying how I feel right now is I accept my defeat, that I know that I cannot win this battle against my opponents, even though all they do is spew out lie after lie after lie. They throw rock after rock after rock. New theory every week, I admit that I cannot win this battle. It doesn't mean I'm not going to fight. I'm going to fight. I just know, like Peter Wrangel did when he took up command of a failed army, that at least we can go down with honor. Okay? And that the sacrifices made by the White Russian army, the sacrifices made by Germany and the Austrian painter, the war is not over yet, guys. Those were battles. And we have to wait and see how the war will play out. Okay? So, I think I'm finally done. Sorry for such a long video. I need to thank everyone that's been donating to me, and keeping me going. At this point, you guys are actually my only lifeline, so I want to thank you all. Everyone that's had my back, supported me, and kept me going. You can follow, in case something happens, this channel gets disconnected, you can follow on Odysee, Instagram, Twitter, and there's a Telegram group. I'm really going to try to be more active there in the next month or so. There is a Give, Send, Go in the description. That is the only way I can receive donations. And yeah, that's it. Actually, yeah, I think I might be able to set up a PayPal soon, actually. Anyways, guys, so all the information is in the description, or it's all here. And I think I'm finally done. And I hope you guys learned something. I really do. And I really do appreciate all of you who watch and support me. And yeah, so we're going to continue. I think the next video is going to be about Hellenism. But I'm also going to I might just do a couple short videos this week. I want to, because one of the claims made by these spiritual nomads is the Bible was written in this 3rd century BC by Jews in Alexandria. And so I want to go through the Torah. I want to go through the history that's actually in Genesis and show you that there's history in Genesis that no Greek ever knew. No Greek ever wrote about. We'll look at the Hittite kingdom. No one wrote about the Hittites. The Hittites were a people that disappeared for 3,000 years. And yet the Bible perfectly preserves them, a lost empire. So we're going to talk about stuff like that. So I'm going to make a few shorter videos, I think, this week. Not to do with this series, just to deviate a bit to show you how amazing the history is in the Torah and in the Bible. All right, guys. So I think we're going to end there. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys are well.